London, May 19th, 1536. A woman kneels on a wooden scaffold inside the Tower of London. The air is still. The crowd, silent. She looks up at the sky and whispers her last words. "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul." A single stroke of a sword, and the Queen of England, Anne Boleyn, is gone. But her death was never truly about justice. It was about power, lust, and the lies that England needed to believe. Chapter 1. The Rise of Anne Boleyn. Before she was a queen, Anne Boleyn was nobody. She wasn't born royal, just the daughter of a minor noble, raised partly in the glittering courts of France, where she learned grace, charm, and wit. When she returned to England, she caught the eye of a married man, not just any man, but King Henry VIII. Henry was obsessed. She was unlike any woman he had ever met, intelligent, sharp-tongued, and immune to his usual seductions. While others fell to his bed, Anne made him wait. For years, Henry wrote her letters filled with passion and desperation, promising to make her his queen, even if he had to defy the Pope himself, and he did. He tore England away from Rome, founded his own church, and married Anne. She became Queen of England, but in doing so, she made enemies everywhere. Chapter 2. The Woman Everyone Loved to Hate. Coronation in 1533 wasn't met with celebration. It was met with curses. To the people, she was the other woman. To the church, she was a witch. To Henry's allies, she was the reason England stood on the edge of rebellion. Inside the palace, whispers began to spread. She uses sorcery. She bewitched the king. She has 6 fingers, the mark of the devil. But Anne's real crime wasn't witchcraft. It was ambition. She was opinionated, political, and often challenged the men around her, including Henry himself. And in Tudor England, a woman who spoke too much, ruled too boldly, or dared to act like an equal was a threat. Chapter 3. The Turning of the King. When Anne failed to give Henry a male heir, his obsession turned to frustration, and frustration to hatred. Their first child, Elizabeth, was a girl. Then, Anne suffered several miscarriages. Meanwhile, another woman entered the king's orbit. Jane Seymour, gentle and quiet, the perfect opposite of Anne. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's most cunning minister, saw the shift in the wind. Anne had once been his ally, but now her influence threatened his power. So Cromwell made a choice. If the king wanted a way out, he would build one. And he did, out of lies. Chapter 4. The Web of Accusations. In April 1536, Cromwell constructed a scandal that would shock the world. He accused Anne of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn. The charges were absurd. Dates didn't match. Locations were impossible. One supposed lover was out of the country during the alleged affair. But it didn't matter. The king wanted Anne gone, and Cromwell knew how to please his master. Anne was arrested at Greenwich Palace and taken to the Tower of London, the very place she had once entered as queen. Chapter 5. The Trial That Was Never Fair. The trial was a performance, not justice. Anne stood alone before a jury of her enemies, men whose fortunes depended on her downfall. She denied every accusation, with calm defiance. "If any man accuses me, let him speak to my face." But no defense mattered. The verdict was decided before she even entered the room. Guilty of adultery, guilty of incest, guilty of treason. And the sentence? Death by beheading. When her brother George was executed first, Anne reportedly whispered, "He is fortunate to go before me." Chapter 6. The Last Morning. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, Anne dressed herself in a simple gray gown and placed a small white cap over her hair. She climbed the scaffold built inside the tower grounds. She spoke softly, forgiving those who condemned her, and prayed for the king's soul, the same king who had signed her death warrant. A French swordsman had been brought specially from Calais, said to be swift and merciful. Anne knelt upright, hands folded, eyes open. When the sword fell, witnesses said her lips were still moving in prayer. Chapter 7. The Aftermath and the Myth. Within 24 hours of her execution, Henry VIII was engaged to Jane Seymour. By the end of the month, they were married. Anne was buried in an unmarked grave beneath the chapel floor. No royal funeral, no ceremony, no crown. But death didn't kill her legend. The Tudor court needed to justify the murder of a queen, so it turned her into a monster, a temptress, a witch, a hypersexual manipulator. Over the centuries, writers and chroniclers painted her as the woman who seduced a king and paid the price. But modern historians reveal a different truth. Anne wasn't killed for lust. She was killed for power. Today, Anne Boleyn remains one of history's most misunderstood women, a queen destroyed not by sin, but by the system that feared her strength. She was ambitious in a world that demanded obedience. She was intelligent in a court that preferred silence. She played the game of kings and lost. But her legacy lived on through her daughter, Elizabeth I, who became one of England's greatest monarchs. In a way, Anne Boleyn won, not through her life, but through her bloodline. She who was condemned as a witch, one historian wrote, gave birth to a queen who ruled like a god.